The Beryl Coronet story from Sherlock Holmes.
One morning, as I stood at our bay window looking down at the street, I remarked, "There's a madman coming this way." Sherlock Holmes rose slowly from his armchair, his hands in the pockets of his dressing gown, and looked out over his shoulder into the street. It was a bright, cold February morning. The snow-covered ground glittered under the winter sun. In the middle of Baker Street, a brown strip had formed where the snow had been trampled down, but on either side of it the snow was still as white as when it had first fallen. Although the snow had been cleared from the gray pavements, they were still dangerously slippery, and as a result, there were fewer people about than usual. The only person approaching from the direction of the Metropolitan Station had caught my attention by his strange behavior. He was a tall, imposing man of about 50. His face was large, sharp-featured, and striking. His clothes, though somewhat lacking in taste, were unmistakably expensive. He wore a black frock coat, a shiny top hat, well-cut gray trousers, and brown gaiters. Yet his movements were utterly inconsistent with the dignity of his attire. He kept running and occasionally jumping. He looked like a tired man unaccustomed to using his legs. As he ran, he waved his arms up and down, turned his head from side to side, and contorted his face in the most extraordinary ways. "What can be the matter with him?" I asked. "He is looking at the house numbers," Holmes replied, rubbing his hands together. "Is he?" "Yes. He is coming here. He has some problem he wishes to consult me about." I recognized the signs. Didn't I tell you?" Before Holmes had finished speaking, the man had reached our door and rung the bell with such violence that the whole house resounded. A moment later, the man was in our sitting room. He was still gasping for breath and continued his wild gesticulations. There was such a fixed look of grief and despair in his eyes that the smile on our faces instantly gave way to feelings of fear and pity. For some time he could say nothing, but bent forward, tugging at his hair like a man at his wit's end. Then suddenly he straightened up and dashed his head against the wall with such violence that Holmes and I sprang forward and dragged him into the middle of the room. Sherlock Holmes seated him in an armchair, sat down beside him, and lightly tapped the man's hand while speaking in that calm, soothing tone in which he excelled. "You have come to tell me what has happened to you, have you not?" he said. "You are exhausted from your haste. Pray rest for a little while. When you have recovered, I shall be happy to help you solve your small difficulty." The man sat for a minute or a little longer, his chest heaving, struggling with his emotions. Then, wiping his forehead with his handkerchief, he turned his face toward us and began to speak, his lips tightly drawn. "You think I am mad, do you not?" he asked. "I see that you are suffering from some great trouble," Holmes replied. "God knows I am. A trouble great enough to drive me insane. It came upon me so suddenly. Though my character has never been stained, I may find myself disgraced before the world. Every man may have private troubles, but when two such calamities strike at once, with full force, it becomes unbearable. I am on the brink of madness, and this is not merely my affair. If this dreadful matter cannot be resolved, it will involve some of the noblest people in the land." "Pray calm yourself," said Holmes. "Tell us who you are and what has happened." "My name may be known to you," the man said. "I am Alexander Holder, a partner in the firm of Holder and Stevenson, the bankers of Threadneedle Street." The name was indeed well known to me. He was the senior partner of the second largest private banking firm in London. What could have reduced one of the city's most prominent citizens to such a pitiful state? We said nothing, allowing him time to compose himself and continue his story. "I know how valuable your time is," he went on. "That is why, when the police inspector advised me to cooperate with you, I came here at once. I traveled to Baker Street by the Underground. After leaving the station, I chose to walk through the snow rather than take a carriage, so as to reach him more quickly. That is why I arrived out of breath, being unused to such exertion. I feel better now, and I will explain what has happened as briefly and clearly as I can. You are well aware that for a bank to prosper, it must invest its deposits as profitably as possible and continually expand its connections. One of our most profitable activities is lending money against solid security. In recent years, we have conducted a great deal of such business, lending large sums to many noble families against securities such as paintings, books, and works of art. Yesterday morning, as I was sitting in my office at the bank, one of the clerks brought me a visiting card. I was astonished when I saw the name upon it, for it belonged to a world-famous dynasty. I think it best not to mention which English house it was. Filled with excitement at such an honor, I rose to receive the visitor, but before I could do so, he entered the room himself with the air of a man anxious to conclude an unpleasant business as quickly as possible. "I hear that you lend money, Mr. Holder," he said. "Our bank lends money upon adequate security," I replied. "I must have £50,000 at once," he said. "I could borrow 10 times that sum from my friends, but I prefer not to mix friendship with business and to manage my own affairs. You will understand that a man in my position does not wish to incur obligations. For how long do you require the money?" I asked. "By Monday, I shall receive a large sum. On that day, I will repay both the loan and whatever interest you consider appropriate. But it is essential that I have the money immediately. If the sum were from my personal funds, I would not hesitate for a moment, but since it must be advanced by the firm, I must protect my partner's interests and require security, even from a nobleman such as yourself." Lifting a square black morocco case from the chair beside him, he said, "I shall be happy to provide security. You have heard of the Beryl Coronet, have you not?" "One of the most precious treasures of the empire," I replied. "Precisely." He opened the case, revealing a magnificent coronet adorned with jewels, resting upon soft flesh-colored velvet. "It contains exactly 39 large barrels," he said. "Its value cannot be precisely calculated. At the very least, it is worth twice the sum I am requesting. I am prepared to leave it with you as security." I took the case in my hands and stared at my noble client in amazement. "Do you doubt its value?" he asked. "Not at all. My only hesitation. You wonder why I would leave it as a pledge. Pray put your mind at ease. I would not do so unless I were absolutely certain of reclaiming it in 4 days. For me, it is merely a matter of form. Is my security sufficient? More than sufficient. The favorable things I have heard of you have led me to entrust this coronet to your care. I rely upon your discretion in keeping this matter secret, and I am confident that you will take every precaution to ensure its safety. Should anything happen to the coronet, it would cause a tremendous scandal. There is little difference between its being damaged and its being completely lost, for the barrels upon it are unique in the world. I leave it with you, fully confident that I shall personally reclaim it from you on Monday." Seeing that my client was eager to take the money and depart, I summoned the cashier and instructed him to pay out the £50,000. When I was once more alone, the sight of the precious box upon my desk filled me with anxiety at the great responsibility I had assumed. There was no doubt that if anything were to happen to this national treasure, a terrible scandal would erupt. I regretted having accepted such a charge, but it was too late. I locked the coronet in my private safe and returned to my work. At the close of business, I felt it would be imprudent to leave such a valuable object at the bank. Bank vaults are sometimes broken into. What would become of me if mine were robbed? I therefore resolved to keep it with me for a few days. That way my mind would be at ease. I hired a carriage and took the safe to my house in Streatham. I did not breathe freely until I had locked the coronet in a drawer of the table in my bedroom. Now, so that you may fully understand the situation, I must tell you something about my household. My groom and my manservant live elsewhere, so they may be disregarded. 3 of the maids have been with me for years, and I have not the slightest doubt of their loyalty. There is also another maid, Lucy Parr, who has been with me only a few months, but she too has an excellent character, and I am very satisfied with her. If she has any fault, it is that she is very beautiful and therefore has men constantly hanging about her. But aside from that, I believe her to be a thoroughly good girl. I have spoken enough of the servants. I must now speak of my family. It will not take long, for I am a widower with only 1 child. My son Arthur has been a bitter disappointment to me. I alone am to blame for this. People used to say that I spoiled him, but I paid no heed. When my dear wife died, he was the only person in the world I loved, and I could not bear to see his smile fade from his face. I granted his every wish. It would have been better had I not done so, but at the time I believed I was acting for his good. I had hoped that he would succeed me in my business, but he had no aptitude for commerce. He is reckless and wayward. To speak plainly, he is not a man to whom one could entrust large sums of money. In his youth, he joined a club frequented by aristocrats. Being handsome and well-mannered, he soon acquired many intimate friends with expensive habits and ample means. There he also developed a taste for gambling and lost large sums of money. On many occasions he has come to me, begging me to pay his debts of honor. Though he has often tried to break free from these dangerous companions, he has always returned to them under the influence of a certain Sir George Bunwell. I was not surprised that Sir George Bunwell exerted such influence over my son, for he was a frequent visitor at our house, and I had ample opportunity to observe how difficult it was to resist his captivating manner. He is older than Arthur and has traveled the world, knowing it thoroughly. He speaks well and is exceedingly handsome, yet when I reflect calmly upon him, I must admit that his gaze and his words inspire me with no confidence. This is not merely my own opinion. My niece Mary, guided by her feminine intuition, arrived at the same conclusion regarding his character. I must also tell you about my niece, for she is the only one remaining. She is the daughter of my brother, who died 5 years ago and was entrusted to my care. Having no one else to look after her, I took her into my home as though she were my own child. She is the light of my household. She manages the house perfectly. It would be difficult to find a more charming, gentle, and gracious woman. She is my right hand. I do not know what I would do without her. She has refused my wishes only once. Because my son loves her deeply, he proposed to her twice, and on both occasions she refused him. If anyone could have guided my son onto the right path, it would have been Mary. Marriage might have changed his life, but alas, it is now too late. I have told you who lives in my house. I must now relate the painful adventure itself. That evening, after dinner, we were sitting in the drawing room drinking our coffee when I told Arthur and Mary of what had occurred during the day. I mentioned that we were harboring a valuable treasure in the house, though of course I did not reveal my client's name. I am certain that Lucy Parr had left the room after serving the coffee, though I'm not sure the door was fully closed. Mary and Arthur were very curious to see the coronet, but I was firmly opposed to handling it at all. "Where is the coronet now?" Arthur asked. "In my room. I hope the house will not be robbed tonight," he said. "It is locked in a drawer," I replied. "But that drawer can be opened with almost any key. When I was a child, I once opened it with the key to the cupboard in the lumber room." Arthur often speaks nonsense, so I paid little attention to his words. That night, however, he followed me to my room, his face marked with sadness. "Father," he said, lowering his head, "could you give me £200? "No, I cannot. I replied sharply. I have been generous enough with you where money is concerned. You are right, he said. But I need this money, or I shall never set foot in the club again. So much the better, I cried. Yes, but then my honor would be ruined, he said. I cannot live with such disgrace. I must obtain that money somehow. If you will not give it to me, I shall find another way. This was the third time that month he had asked me for money, and I was furious. You shall not have a penny, I shouted. Arthur said nothing more, bowed, and left the room. After he had gone, I opened the drawer to check the coronet and then locked it again. I then went through the house to make sure there were no security issues. Although I usually entrust this duty to Mary, I wished to do it myself that night. As I was descending the stairs, I saw Mary standing by the window at the side of the drawing room. As I approached, she closed the window and locked it. Father, she said, with a manner that struck me as slightly anxious, did you give Lucy permission to go out tonight? Certainly not. She just came in through the back door. I am quite sure she was speaking with someone at the side entrance. This is very improper behavior, and it must stop. You can speak to her in the morning. If you wish, I will speak to her as well. All the doors and windows are bolted, are they not? Yes, Father. Then good night, I said, and kissed Mary before going up to my room. I fell asleep soon afterward. I'm trying to tell you everything that might have any bearing on this affair. If there is anything you wish me to clarify, do not hesitate to ask. That will not be necessary, Holmes replied. You're giving us a most detailed account. Now I come to the most important part of my story. I am a light sleeper, and my state of mind that night made my sleep even lighter than usual. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, I awoke to noises from within the house. They ceased before I was fully awake, but I had the impression that a window had been gently closed. I lay still, listening. Suddenly, I was startled by the distinct sound of footsteps coming from the adjoining room. My heart pounding, I sprang from my bed and looked toward the corner of the room. Arthur, I shouted. You traitor! You thief! How dare you lay hands on that coronet? The lamp was still half lit as I had left it. My son Arthur stood beside it, dressed only in his shirt and trousers, holding the coronet in his hands, his face wearing an expression of misery. He appeared to be exerting all his strength, as though trying to bend it. At my cry, he dropped the coronet, and his face turned deathly white. I immediately picked it up and examined it. One of the golden corners was gone, along with 3 of the barrels set upon it. You villain! I shouted, beside myself with rage. You have ruined the coronet. You have stained my honor forever. Where are the missing jewels you have stolen? Stolen, he cried. Seizing him by the shoulders and shaking him, I shouted, Yes, stolen. You thief! All the barrels are there, said Arthur. None can be missing. 3 of them are missing, and you know perfectly well where they are. Is it not enough that you have stolen them? Must you also lie about it? Do you imagine I did not see you trying to break off another piece? You have exhausted every insult, he said. That is enough. I will not utter another word to you on this subject, for you have heaped unspeakable abuse upon me. In the morning I shall leave this house and make my own way in the world. You shall leave this house only between 2 policemen. I shouted. I was beside myself with grief and rage. I will not let this matter rest. With a determination I had never expected from his nature, he replied, You will learn nothing from me. Since you intend to call the police, let the police discover whatever there is to be discovered. Because I had raised my voice in anger, the entire household had been awakened by then. The first to rush into the room was Mary. One glance at the coronet and at Arthur's face told her everything. She uttered a scream and collapsed to the floor. I sent one of the servants to summon the police at once and handed the matter over to them. When the inspector entered the house with his constable, Arthur stood with folded arms and a sullen expression, and asked whether I intended to accuse him of theft. I replied that the affair was no longer a private one, that the damaged coronet was national property, and that I insisted the law should take its full course. "At least do not have me arrested at once," he said. "If you allow me to leave the house for 5 minutes, it will be for the good of us both, so that you may escape or hide what you have stolen." I replied. Then, remembering the dreadful position in which I found myself, I began to plead with him. I explained that it was not merely my own honor at stake, but that a scandal might arise which would shake the entire country. If he would tell me what he had done with the 3 missing barrels, all could still be averted. "You must realize that you were caught in the act," I said. "There is no use in denial. But if you will tell me where the barrels are, I will forgive your crime and treat the whole matter as though it had never occurred." Turning away from me angrily, he said, "Keep your mercy for yourself." He was clearly not to be persuaded by words. There was only one course left. I instructed the inspector to arrest him. Arthur's person and his room were searched, and every place in the house where the jewels might conceivably have been hidden was examined, but not the slightest trace was found. My wretched son, despite all our entreaties and threats, did not open his mouth to utter a single word. This morning he was placed in a cell. After completing the necessary formalities at the police station, I came here in haste at an early hour, trusting in your powers of unraveling events. The police admit that they have so far discovered nothing. You may incur whatever expenses are necessary. I have already offered a reward of £1,000 to whoever finds the barrels. My God, what am I to do? In one night, I have lost my honor, the jewels, and my son. What am I to do? He buried his head in his hands and began to rock back and forth like a child. It was plain that he was crushed beneath the weight of his troubles. Sherlock Holmes sat for several minutes in silence, his brows knitted and his eyes fixed upon the fireplace. "Do you receive many visitors at your house?" he asked at last. "Apart from my partner and his family, only Arthur's friend comes from time to time. Sir George Bunwell has visited us several times lately. Otherwise, I would say no one else comes." "Do you attend social gatherings?" "Arthur does, but Mary and I seldom leave the house. We do not care for such things." "That seems unusual for a young woman. She is domestic by nature. Besides, she is not so very young. She is 24. From what you have told us, this affair must have been a severe shock to her as well." "An enormous shock, greater even than it was to me." "Are you both convinced that Arthur is guilty?" "How could I not be, after seeing him with the coronet in his hands with my own eyes? I should hardly consider that conclusive proof." "Was the remaining portion of the coronet damaged?" "Yes, it was bent. Is it not possible that he was trying to straighten it? For heaven's sake, you're trying to relieve both him and me of this dreadful burden, but it is not so simple. What business had he in my room at all? And if his intentions were innocent, why did he offer no explanation?" "You are right. Yet if he were guilty, why did he not invent some falsehood? His silence may be interpreted either way. There are several curious features in this case. What explanation do the police give for the noise that awakened you?" "They think Arthur may have made it while closing the door of his own room." "A plausible theory indeed. A man whose plan has been thwarted would surely wish to slam his door and awaken the whole household." "And what do they say about the missing jewels?" "They are prying up the floorboards and searching inside the furniture in their efforts to find them." "Have they examined the exterior of the house?" "Yes, they searched the entire garden with great thoroughness." "My dear sir," said Holmes, "is it not evident that this matter is far more complex than either you or the police suppose? Though it may appear simple, it strikes me as a most intricate case. Let's consider your theory. According to you, your son rose from his bed, took a great risk by entering your room, opened a drawer, removed the coronet, wrenched off a small portion of it by sheer force, went elsewhere to hide 3 of the 39 barrels where no one could ever find them, and then returned, again at great risk, to your room with the remaining 36 barrels. Does that strike you as probable? With a look of despair, the banker cried, "What other explanation can there be? If his intentions were innocent, why does he refuse to speak?" "That is precisely what we must discover," Holmes replied. "Mr. Holder, if you please, let us now go together to Streatham and examine the details more closely for an hour or so." My friend insisted that I accompany them. Indeed, no urging was necessary, for the story I had heard had aroused my keenest curiosity and interest. I must confess that, like the banker, I believed his son to be guilty. Yet I trusted Holmes's powers of reasoning so completely that I felt there must be a reason why he was dissatisfied with the obvious explanation. During our carriage ride to the southern suburbs of London, Holmes did not utter a single word. With his head bowed and his hat pulled down over his eyes, he appeared to be lost in deep thought. The faint glimmer of hope was enough to revive our client, and at one point we even exchanged a brief conversation on business matters, despite our mutual lack of enthusiasm for such topics. After a short train journey and an even shorter walk, we arrived at Fairbank, the modest home of the wealthy banker. The house stood some distance back from the road, a large building constructed of white stone. Beyond the 2 iron gates at the entrance lay a snow-covered lawn and a broad, winding carriage drive. To our right was a small clump of shrubs, and beyond it a narrow path that ran between hedges from the kitchen door to the road. To our left was a track leading to the stables. This path lay outside the grounds and, though little used, was a public right-of-way. Holmes left us at the door and made a quiet circuit of the house, walking round to the garden behind and along the path leading to the stables. As his inspection took some time, Mr. Holder and I went into the dining room and waited by the fireplace. While we sat in silence, the door opened and a young lady entered. She was slightly above average height, slender, with black hair and black eyes. The pallor of her skin made her hair and eyes appear even darker. I cannot recall ever having seen a face so deathly pale. Her lips were as white as her complexion, and her eyes were swollen from weeping. Her silent entrance filled me with even deeper sadness than the banker's morning account. I was deeply impressed by her self-control and evident strength of character. Paying no attention to my presence, she went straight to her uncle, stroked his head with gentle affection, and said, "You have given instructions for Arthur's release, dear uncle, have you not?" "No, no, my child. This matter must be investigated to the very end. But I am certain of his innocence. You know women's intuitions. I know Arthur has done nothing wrong. You will regret treating him so harshly. If he is innocent, then why does he remain silent? Who can say? Perhaps he is hurt that you should suspect him. How could I not suspect him when I saw him holding the coronet with my own eyes? But perhaps he merely picked it up to look at it. Oh, please believe me. He is innocent. Withdraw your complaint and let this matter end. Arthur's imprisonment grieves me deeply. I will not withdraw my complaint until the jewels are found. Never, Mary. You pity Arthur, but you do not think of me at all. I have no intention of letting this matter rest. On the contrary, I have summoned someone from London to investigate it more thoroughly. Turning toward me, she asked, "This gentleman?" "No, his friend. He wished to be alone for a while. He is near the stables at present." "Near the stables?" She frowned. "What does he hope to find there?" "Ah, I believe the gentleman you mentioned has arrived. I am convinced of Arthur's innocence. Sir, I hope you will be able to prove that my cousin Arthur is innocent." "I share your belief, and together we shall prove it," Holmes replied, after wiping the snow from his shoes on the mat. I believe I have the honor of addressing Miss Mary Holder. May I ask you one or two questions? Certainly. I would do anything to help clear up this dreadful affair. Did you hear anything during the night? No, nothing until I heard my uncle shouting. At the sound of his voice, I came downstairs at once. You closed the doors and windows last night. Did you fasten every window? Yes. And this morning they were all still fastened. Yes. One of your maids has a sweetheart, I believe. You mentioned to your uncle that she went out last night to see him. Yes. She was the one serving us in the drawing room. She may have heard my uncle speaking about the coronet. I see. Do you suppose that she went out and repeated what she had heard of her lover, and that together they planned the theft? Unable to restrain himself any longer, the banker cried, "What good are these vague theories? I tell you, I saw Arthur holding the coronet." Pray be patient, Mr. Holder. We shall return to that point. Miss Holder, you saw this girl return to the house by the kitchen door, did you not? Yes. When I went to the kitchen to check the doors, I saw her slipping quietly inside. Though it was dark, I also saw the man. Did you recognize him? Why, of course. He is the man who brings us vegetables. His name is Francis Prosper. He was standing to the left of the door, said Holmes. That is to say, he did not come right up to it. He was closer to the road. Yes, that is correct. And he has a wooden leg, does he not? A look of something like terror came into the young woman's black eyes. My God, you are like a magician, she exclaimed. How could you possibly know that? Though she smiled, there was no trace of a smile on Holmes's keen, searching face. I think I had better go upstairs now, he said. I can come outside again later. In fact, it would be better first to take a look at the downstairs windows. He walked briskly from one window to another, stopping only before the large drawing room window that overlooked the path leading to the stables. Opening it, he examined the sill carefully with a magnifying glass he produced from his pocket. After a short while, he said, "Now we may go upstairs." The banker's bedroom was plainly furnished. There was a gray carpet, a large writing desk, and a full-length mirror. Holmes first went to the desk and examined the lock with great care. "Which key opens this?" he asked. "The one my son mentioned, the key to the cupboard in the lumber room." "Is the key here?" "Yes, here it is on the desk." Sherlock Holmes took the key and opened the drawer. "It makes no sound," he said. "It is no wonder you were not awakened. I believe the coronet is in this case. I should like to take a look." Opening the case, he placed the coronet upon the desk. It was a masterpiece of a jeweler's art. He had never seen jewels like the remaining 36 before. One of the side corners had been torn away, together with the 3 jewels set in it. "Yes, Mr. Holder," said Holmes, "here is our coronet. May I ask you to try to break it?" The banker recoiled in horror. "The very thought is dreadful," he said. "Then I shall try." Holmes suddenly exerted all his strength, but in vain. "I do not think anything has happened," he said. "Though my fingers are exceptionally strong, even I cannot break it easily." How then could an ordinary man do so? And even if he did manage it, do you know what sort of sound it would make? It would crack like a pistol shot. Could you have heard nothing when all this was happening only a few yards from you? I do not know what to think. I have no idea. When you saw your son, he was wearing neither shoes nor slippers, was he? He was wearing only his trousers and shirt. Thank you. Fortune is favoring us in this inquiry. If we fail to clear it up, it will be entirely our own fault. And now, with your permission, I should like to continue my investigation outside, for fear that unnecessary footprints might complicate matters. He did not wish us to accompany him. After remaining outside for more than an hour, he returned with his feet deep in snow. His expression was as inscrutable as ever. "I believe I have now seen everything I need to see here, Mr. Holder," he said. "I should be of greater use to you if I return to my own home. But where are the jewels, Mr. Holmes?" "That I cannot tell you." Rubbing his hands together, the banker groaned. "I shall never see them again. And my son, is there any hope for him?" "My opinion on that matter remains unchanged." "Then for heaven's sake, will you tell me what happened in my house last night? If you will be at my house in Baker Street tomorrow between 9 and 10 o'clock, I hope to be able to enlighten you. I understand that you are giving me a free hand and placing no limit upon my expenses in return for recovering the jewels. I would give my entire fortune to have them back." "Very good. You may be assured that I shall solve this matter. For the present, goodbye. I may perhaps return this evening." Though I could not clearly discern what conclusions my friend had reached, I was certain that he had made up his mind on the matter. On our way home, I tried several times to raise the subject, but each time he changed the conversation, until at last I abandoned the attempt. Before 3 o'clock that afternoon, we were back at our lodgings. He hurried into his room and returned a few minutes later dressed in shabby clothes. With his collar turned up, his shabby coat, red scarf, and worn boots, he looked the very picture of a tramp. Glancing at the mirror above the fireplace, he said, "I think this will do. I wish I could take you with me, Watson, but I'm afraid that won't be possible. I may be on the right track, or I may be chasing a mere illusion. In an hour or two the matter will be settled." Cutting a piece of steak from what lay on the sideboard, he placed it between 2 slices of bread, stuffed the sandwich into his pocket, and went out. He returned just as I was finishing my afternoon tea. He was in excellent spirits. In his hand, he was swinging a boot with flexible sides. Tossing it into a corner, he poured himself some tea. "I only dropped in as I passed," he said. "I must be off again at once." "Where to?" "To the other side of the West End. My business may take some time." "If I'm late, don't be anxious." "How is it going, then?" "Fairly well. I went to Streatham, but I didn't go into the house. It was a very neat little case, one I certainly wouldn't have wished to miss. This is no time to sit here gossiping. I must return to my respectable self without delay." From his manner, I could tell that matters were progressing far better than his words suggested. His eyes sparkled, and color had returned to his pale face. He hurried upstairs, and a few minutes later, I heard the door of the sitting room close. Once again, he was in pursuit of his quarry. I waited until midnight, but he did not return, so I retired to my own room. It was nothing unusual, for I was accustomed to his sometimes being absent from home for days at a time when following a trail. I did not know at what hour he came in, but when I went down to breakfast in the morning, Holmes was seated at the table, looking fresh and tidy, with his coffee in one hand and his newspaper in the other. "Forgive me for beginning breakfast without you, Watson," he said, "but you know we have an early appointment with our client this morning." "Well, it's already past 9, I replied. "I shouldn't be surprised if he arrived at any moment. I think I heard the bell." Indeed, it was our banker friend. I was astonished at the change one day had wrought in him. His broad, massive face seemed to have shrunk and sagged. His hair appeared somewhat whiter. He was in an even worse condition than on the previous morning. Not frantic and reckless this time, but exhausted and lifeless. He collapsed into the chair. I pushed toward him. "I do not know what sin I have committed to deserve all this," he said. "Only 2 days ago, I was a rich and happy man, indifferent to the world. Now I am alone and dishonored. One calamity follows another. My niece Mary has left me." "Left you?" "Yes. When I went into her room this morning, I saw that her bed had not been slept in. She was gone. She left a letter on the table in the drawing room. Yesterday I told her, not in anger, but in my sorrow, that everything might have turned out far better for Arthur if she had married him. I spoke thoughtlessly. She mentions it in her note. "Dear Uncle, I feel that I have caused you sufficient trouble. Had I acted differently, this unfortunate affair might never have occurred, and we might all have lived together happily under the same roof. I must now leave this place forever, Do not concern yourself about my future, for I shall not suffer want. Above all, do not attempt to find me, for you would only weary yourself and do me harm. Ever loving you. Mary, what does she mean by this, Mr. Holmes? Do you think she intends to take her own life? No, nothing of the kind. Perhaps this is for the best. I believe your troubles are nearing their end. Indeed, is that so? Have you heard something? Have you learned something? Where are the jewels? Will you pay an additional £1,000 for each jewel? I would give 10,000. That will not be necessary. 3,000 will suffice. And I believe you offered a reward as well. Have you your checkbook with you? Here is a pen. Will you kindly write a check for £4,000? With an expression of amazement, the man wrote the check. Holmes walked to the table and produced a triangular piece of gold bearing 3 jewels, which he placed upon it. Our client uttered a cry of joy and seized the coronet. "You have found them," he cried, scarcely able to speak. "I am saved. I am saved." His joy was as sincere as his sorrow had been. He clasped the recovered jewels to his breast. Sherlock Holmes then said, with a slightly stern manner, "There is one more debt you must pay, Mr. Holder." "A debt?" Taking up the pen again, he said, "Name the sum, and I will write the check at once." "No, you owe me nothing. You owe an apology to a noble young man, your son. If he were my child, I should be proud of what he did. Then Arthur did not steal it. I told you so yesterday, and I repeat it today. He was not the thief. Then you are certain of it. Let us go to him at once and tell him the truth. He already knows it. When I solve the case, I want to speak with your son." At first, he had no intention of explaining what had happened. I therefore explained it to him myself. He admitted that I was right and supplied me with certain details that I had not fully worked out. But the news you brought this morning may well astonish him. For heaven's sake, tell me at last, what is the truth of the matter? I shall tell you both that and how I solved it. Let me begin with the hardest thing for me to say and for you to accept. Sir George Bunwell and your niece Mary have conspired together and eloped. My Mary would never do such a thing. This is no conjecture. I'm certain of it. When you admitted that man into your house, neither you nor your son knew his true character. He is one of the most dangerous men in England. A ruined gambler, an incorrigible womanizer, a man without heart or conscience. Your niece is unfamiliar with such men. The banker could not bear to hear a word against his niece. He spoke at length of her goodness, of how she alone understood him, and how he was happy only in her presence. That man must have deceived her utterly. Since they spoke almost every night, she may well have yielded to his influence. But left to herself, she would never have done such a thing. The man's face turned deathly pale. "No, I cannot believe it," he cried. "Then let me tell you what occurred in your house last night. When your niece believed that you were asleep, she quietly went downstairs to speak with her lover and went to the window overlooking the path to the stables. From the footprints in the snow, it was clear that the man had waited there for some time. When Mary mentioned the coronet, his greed was aroused, and he succeeded in tempting her. I have no doubt that Mary loved you dearly, but there are women whose love for their lovers overcomes all other affections. Mary appears to have been one of them. Just as she was obeying her lover's instructions, she noticed you descending the stairs. She at once closed the window and told you of the servant girl's escapade with her wooden-legged lover, a story that, as you know, was entirely true. Your son Arthur, after the conversation between you, went to his room and lay down, but his gambling debts at the club prevented him from sleeping soundly. Around midnight, he noticed someone passing quietly by his door. Rising to look, he was astonished to see his cousin walking silently along the corridor and entering your room. He stood rooted to the spot. Hastily putting on some clothes, He resolved to observe where this strange business would lead. When your niece emerged shortly afterward, the valuable coronet was visible in her hands by the light of the corridor. As she went downstairs with it, your son, in terror, ran and hid behind the curtain near your door so that he could observe what was happening below without being seen. He saw her quietly open the window and hand the coronet to someone outside in the darkness. As she closed the window and hurried back to her room, she passed very close to the curtain behind which your son was hiding. So long as your niece was about, your son could not act, for he would thereby have exposed the crime of the woman he loved. But as soon as she had returned to her room, he resolved to set matters right, thinking of the terrible position in which he would be placed. He ran downstairs at once, opened the window, and, barefoot, set off in pursuit of the thief. By the moonlight, he could follow the footprints in the snow and distinguish the dark figure moving ahead of him. Sir George Bunwell attempted to escape, but Arthur overtook him, and a struggle ensued. Your son seized one end of the coronet, the man the other. During the struggle, your son struck Sir George Bunwell a blow over the eye, splitting his eyebrow. At that moment, there was a sharp crack, and when your son found the coronet in his hand, he ran back to the house, closed the window, and went up to your room. He realized that the coronet had been bent during the struggle and was attempting to straighten it when you appeared upon the scene. "Is such a thing possible?" the banker stammered. When he deserved sincere thanks, he was met instead with insults, and his anger was only natural. Though your niece was unworthy of your son's love, it was impossible for him to explain matters without betraying her. With true nobility, he chose to preserve the secret of the woman he loved. So that is why Mary screamed and fainted when she saw the coronet again, cried Mr. Holder. "My God, how foolish, how blind I have been!" And my son asked for 5 minutes' leave. He wished to see whether the broken piece lay where they had struggled. How unjust I have been to him. Holmes continued, "When I arrived at your house, my first task was to examine the surroundings to see whether the snow might provide any helpful clues. I knew that no snow had fallen since the previous night, and that the severe cold had preserved the footprints intact. I examined the road, but the tracks there had been trampled by many people and told me nothing. A little farther on, however, on the side of the kitchen door farthest from the road, a man and a woman had been standing and talking. The circular mark beside the man's footprint showed that one of his legs was wooden. I could even tell that they had been disturbed in their conversation, for the woman's footprints showed her toes deeply pressed into the snow as she ran backward, while her heels barely touched it. The wooden-legged man, after waiting a short time, had then departed. I assumed at once that these tracks belonged to the maid you mentioned and her lover, and my inquiries confirmed this. Within the garden, I saw many scattered footprints, which I attributed to the police. But when I examined the path to the stables, I saw written plainly in the snow a long and complicated story. There were 2 parallel lines of footprints made by a man wearing boots, and another pair made by a barefooted man. From what you had told me, I recognized with great satisfaction that the latter were your sons. The owner of the booted tracks had walked in both directions, while the barefooted man had run, and since his footprints fell upon those of the booted man, it was clear that he had followed him. Tracing the tracks, I found that they led to the drawing room window. While waiting there, the booted man had trampled the snow heavily. I then followed the tracks in the opposite direction. They continued for about 100 yards down the path. At that point, the direction of the boot prints changed, and the snow was violently disturbed. A struggle had clearly taken place. A few drops of blood on the ground confirmed my conclusion. The boot prints then continued farther down the path, accompanied by a few small bloodstains that showed who had been injured in the struggle. I followed the tracks to the main road, but beyond that point the road had been cleared. and I could trace them no farther. You may recall that upon entering the house, I at once examined the sill and frame of the drawing room window with my magnifying glass. I immediately recognized the mark left by a wet instep as someone climbed inside. At that moment, I began to reconstruct what must have occurred. A man had waited outside. Someone from within had brought the coronet. Your son had witnessed it, pursued the thief, and struggled with him. Each had grasped one end of the coronet, and together they had broken what neither could have broken alone. Your son returned with the prize, but a portion remained in the hands of his adversary. Up to that point, everything was clear. The question remained, who was this man, and who had brought him the coronet? I have long held the maxim that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. I knew that you had not handed the coronet to the man. That left your niece and the servants. If it had been one of the servants, why should your son have sacrificed himself? There was no reasonable motive, but his love for his cousin provided an excellent reason for concealing her secret, a disgraceful secret at that. Your seeing your niece close the window and her fainting when she saw the coronet again confirmed my suspicions. But who was Mary's accomplice? It could only have been her lover. What other affection could have outweighed her love and gratitude toward you? I knew that you seldom went out and that your circle was limited. Yet among your acquaintances was one man whose reputation among women was notorious, Sir George Bunwell. He must have been the owner of the boots and the possessor of the missing jewels. Though he knew that Arthur understood everything, he felt secure, for if Arthur spoke, the family honor would be stained. You can easily guess what I did next. Disguised as a tramp, I went to Sir George's house, ingratiated myself with his servant, learned that his eyebrow had been split the previous night, and finally purchased the boots he had worn for 6 shillings. I returned to Streatham with them and found that they matched the tracks exactly. I did see a ragged vagrant wandering about the road last night, said Mr. Holder. That was I. I had found the thief. I returned home at once to change my clothes. I was at the most delicate stage of the affair, for allowing it to reach the courts would have caused a tremendous scandal. The man was clever and knew that our hands were tied. I went to his house to speak with him. At first he denied everything, but when I recounted the details one by one, he began to threaten me and made a dash toward a life preserver hanging on the wall. I knew well the sort of man I was dealing with, and before he could act, I pressed my revolver to his head. He surrendered at once. When I told him we would pay £1,000 for each jewel, he began to curse. Damn it, he said. I've already sold the 3 for 600. On his promise that no complaint would be made against him, I obtained the address of the man who had bought the stones. I went straight to him and, after hard bargaining, purchased the jewels at £1,000 apiece. I then went to your son, showed him the recovered piece of the coronet, and assured him that all was well. After that exhausting day, I went to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. The banker rose from his chair. It has been a day that saved England from a great scandal, he said. I do not know how to thank you, sir. I am deeply indebted to you. You may be certain that I shall repay your great kindness. The things said of you were no exaggeration. I must now go at once to my son and beg his forgiveness. What you have told me of Mary has wounded my heart deeply. I suppose you cannot even tell me where she is now. Wherever George Bunwell is, I am certain she is with him, Holmes replied, and I am equally certain that whatever sins he may have committed, he will soon pay for them dearly.